All right, Monday night, another review from the Pew, the podcast, and we are down a couple minutes. Um, Here's some feedback, so let me lean back a little bit. John Reed is sick. He doesn't have a voice, so John Reed's on in. We're going to have the guest Brandon Dirksen in, but Brandon has a little illness in the family, so these guys are in their prayers. Hopefully, these guys will feel better, but I'm happy because Brandon Klein's here. Brandon, how's it going tonight?
I'm alive.
So how do you feel? Where are you at in the sick counter compared to those other guys?
I think I have a very small hint of a sore throat, but maybe I took an allergy medicine, so I should be okay tomorrow.
Well, Brandon's a Lou Gehrig of the podcast, so it's going to take a lot to keep him away. Yeah, so, all right. Well, thanks for being there. Well, we got a bunch of topics to talk about today. We kind of switched things up a little bit with different people, but let's start talking about them. I got to say, and those who know me, I have a 6-year-old kid. I have to say it because if I didn't, I might be a creep for bringing this up. But big news around our family this week, Brandon, was the release of the Frozen 2 trailer. Brandon, I know you guys don't have kids yet, but what's you and your wife's take on Frozen? Are you guys into it all? Where have you been on the movie series?
Yeah, I think I saw the movie in theaters, actually. I mean, my wife's not indifferent, more or less indifferent. I actually watched the new trailer for the new upcoming sequel twice now. And, it looks good. Yeah, kind of excited to actually see what they do to the mythology there.
Yeah, my 6-year-old loves Frozen. She loves the song Let It Go, and we've watched Frozen probably a couple hundred times over the past 2 or 3 years. It looks interesting. As a 44-year-old guy, I mean, I can watch different types of things. I don't know. It was funny. The sister was swinging a knife around at the end of the trailer. So is this taking a dark turn? I mean, what have you heard about the new movie?
All I've heard about the movie is since the trailer came out. I mean, like the only other thing I think I've came up in like even before this trailer, like months and months and months ago, was like talk of people were wanting Elsa to have a girlfriend in this movie. I don't know if Disney is going to go in that direction or not, but really from what I see in the trailer, is it possible one possible theory though is that we might see people with like similar powers to Elsa though, and but they'll control different elements. And it seems to be something either related to the wind or to leaves, based on that new mysterious girl that everyone's trying to figure out who it is.
And I think what's it been 4 years since the movie came out?
Maybe it sounds. I'm not sure. I can't remember. I think it sounds about right though.
Well, I wonder too, and I joke when I say dark turn. I mean, I don't think it's going to take a crazy turn, but is it going to be a little bit more of a grown-up version of Frozen? I mean, there's other movies and shows that kind of keep the same age level. Maybe the hope is kids that are, love Frozen, maybe it's more geared to a slightly older kid. I don't know.
I think that's a good take. It's kind of like the Harry Potter series where it kind of grew and became darker and kind of aged with its readership.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Continue.
No, you're good. That's basically it. The end.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see what develops in it. And I guess my only concern as a parent of a 6-year-old, hopefully it doesn't take too crazy of a turn for a 6-year-old. But hey, we're looking forward to it. I guess the only other thing is, for, superhero movies or I guess other movies that adults understand, we totally get the idea of if you see a trailer and you say, hey, it's coming out in fall or Christmas, you understand that. You might be like, man, I can't wait to watch this movie, but you understand what time element is. The hard thing about it is I showed my daughter, look over, and hey, what do you think? And all she says is more. And, it's kind of hard for a little girl in February to understand that this is coming out in the fall. So I guess that's my only objection, but I guess it's nice to get a little bit of a taste of the film. So should be interesting to see what happens. It's going to do bonkers at the box office. I mean, look, I think we could guarantee say that.
And I think it's safe to say this is probably like done pretty well in the modern times. So yeah, I'm expecting it to be a pretty good movie. I think it is interesting that the sequel is becoming a bit darker. At least that's how, I still think they'll be true to it being still a children or family, but not as dark as it seems. But I think it'll still be very entertaining nonetheless.
Very good. Hey, you're cutting out just a little bit, Brandon. So let's see how hopefully the stream stays pretty good. Yeah, but it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see what happens. And I don't want to go into a discussion of gay rights. We can remain neutral with that. It'll be interesting too to say, I mean, if they want to throw that in there, I guess it's okay. I think part of the movie was it was a movie, and hopefully we're not trying to advance just one particular thing in there. I've seen some movies kind of get ruined in the past just by kind of getting more into a social issue. Whatever they decide to do, they decide to do. But hopefully, the social issue doesn't overtake the power of a movie. I guess that's just my take, but it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, it'll be kind of interesting to see what happens. From what I can tell, I think Elsa's going to take more of, at the very least, a proactive role and play more of a heroine. For sure, from the looks of it, that's exciting because last movie she was more of the antagonist for at least a good portion of the film, and then she's now going to be probably fighting for the good side this time around. So that's going to be kind of fun to see. Yeah, I'm excited for it. I don't know if my wife will come be with me in the theater.
Yeah. Well, and having a little girl with autism too, we'll probably have to wait till it comes out in video too for us to thoroughly enjoy it. So it'll be interesting, and you never know. Maybe by Frozen 10, it'll become like Game of Thrones, and we'll be watching on HBO. Who knows? So should be interesting. And speaking of little kid shows, and again, I am a parent. I mean, if I wasn't a parent, we'd be absolute creeps for talking about this. But one of the shows, and geez, we could talk about for 3 hours about this, all the crazy shows that I think are insane that, my daughter likes. But one show that's actually kind of funny is Peppa Pig. Have you had any experience with Peppa Pig, Brandon?
I have not. I actually haven't.
Well, you got to become a parent because you'll become. Peppa Pig actually has a little bit of a plot to it. It's a little bit of a sitcom. It's about this British family. And, it just tells the story of the mom, dad, and kids and everything. But it's kind of weird because, everything's on a hill. So from the house they live on is on the top of a steep hill to the schools they go to and everything else. I think that's kind of funny. And it's weird, too, because when they laugh, they all fall on the ground and laugh. They don't just laugh and say, ha, ha, ha. They fall on the ground, they roll around, and other stuff like that. So my daughter loves it. And there was a story that came out this week. Peppa Pig being a British comedy, a lot of British accents and everything. And they were kind of speculating that are kids turning more British because they like Peppa Pig and everything. And Brandon, you've said you're not a big fan of Peppa Pig, which is fine. Have you experienced that along your life where either yourself personally or maybe because of somebody that's popular, where people not just, try to be like them, but they almost start to sound like them and everything else?
Well, it's funny you say that, Chris, because my grandmother is actually from Manchester, England. She immigrated here to the States in the 1950s, and she does still have a bit of an accent. I haven't grown up with her for a good portion of my life. I haven't necessarily heard her accent. I can't really even hear it that much. I can now kind of hear it when I pay attention. But yeah, I'm probably sure I've picked up some of her words and her phrases and some of her culture over the years. It's funny when people come over who've never met her before and they meet her and like, oh, where are you from?
Yeah,
so that's like my British experience.
Well, and I think it's okay. I mean, you're kind of, if you get fired up about it, you're almost saying, hey, it's bad to be British, and having an accent isn't the worst thing in the world. It's interesting. I think one of the things I have to be careful about around my daughter is, even if you watch something that's really not that bad, she starts to repeat everything. And she's come close to swearing a few times, and we have to be really careful. So it's kind of funny. So to me, I think that's the thing people maybe should watch out for a little bit more. But hey, if your kid sounds British, I don't know.
It's not the worst thing, Chris. I remember when they said the baby Einstein programs actually make kids less smart or something a few years ago. That was, there could be worse things, I guess, for children program. But yeah.
Well, I think I heard once that some people accuse Peppa Pig of, like, if you watch Peppa Pig, it would lead you to have autism or something, which I think that's kind of ridiculous. But hey, especially the parent, watch what your kids. Be careful about what your kids watch. But if you're afraid of accents, come on, there's bigger fish in the world to fry there. So speaking of interesting things, and I'm not a cable guy anymore. Brandon, do you subscribe to cable? How do you get your TV?
Well, living with my mother-in-law right now, I'm kind of pigging back off of her cable package. But if I was living alone, no, I wouldn't have cable. This would be using Netflix or other services.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting for me. We've got my parents shortly before my dad passed. They have a nice cable package, and they didn't use their what do you call it, the hardware cable. So we're able to share the apps that they have, and it's been kind of an interesting thing for us. We've kind of watched some TV on apps, and we also subscribe to a couple services. I find it interesting. Pretty soon, Apple is going to be introducing their own subscription service, and I think they're trying to do a deal with Oprah, and they're trying to get some other good content, which every subscription service is coming after. I guess the concern I have is, how much is too much? I know some people, when they buy cable, they spend $100, but if you start subscribing to Netflix and Hulu and other things, that can get to be a high cost. Brandon, what do you think is too much in terms of what your bill is for what you subscribe to each month?
Yeah, it's the kind of the joke these days is that you could cut the cable cord, but then if you get your Netflix subscription, your Amazon subscription, your Hulu subscription, your soon-to-be Disney Plus subscription, all those things are just going to add up to the same cost as cable. Now, technically, one advantage argument you can make is that the prices on those won't fluctuate as much as your cable bill, because I'm sure, you buy a cable package and you get it like this certain price for 8 months, and then after that 8-month period, it goes back up to what's supposed to be its original price. And I'm sure prices fluctuate without really any heads up. Whereas Netflix, when the prices go up, they let everyone know. They just recently mentioned they're increasing their prices up. I really think people still have an ability to really figure out which services work best for them and what content they're interested in. So if you like a show, I guess, from that's exclusively provided by each individual streaming network, you might be out of luck and have to pay a pretty price eventually.
What makes Apple worth it? I hear a lot of people really love Netflix because they're spending billions. It's almost billions on content, and obviously, that you get some unique content. It's not just that they have the latest season of your show or whatever. What what would make Apple? I mean, I don't think Oprah alone is going to make us want to subscribe to Apple. What do you want to see out of Apple that might make you say, "Hey, maybe it's worth it"?
I would say what would make it Apple worth it, I guess, like if there's really good original content programming. YouTube, well, I almost kind of was interested in the YouTube service because they did a sequel series to The Karate Kid, which I haven't had a chance to watch yet. But yeah, I think it depends on Apple's going to have to try and market whatever content it produces, and hopefully it's good storytelling. HBO is doing pretty well with its original content programming. I think we're definitely going to see them ramp up more efforts on that front as they get more into the streaming business. But yeah, I mean, I think that's the issue though. Overall, it's just there's so many streaming service options that it's really hard to pick which ones you like, and we're starting to see even some ramp up from CBS All Access, which recently promoted The Twilight Zone, starring Jordan Peele on the Super Bowl. So that looks even interesting. But is it really worth the subscription price?
Yeah, it's funny when you look at like NBC online. You can, especially if you put your cable, password in there, you can pretty much watch almost everything. And even if you don't, you can watch some of the latest shows. Now you have to watch commercials, but it's a couple minutes every half hour. It just surprises me. I think there's a lot of it. Like when the first streaming, I thought it was really cool. You could watch some TV for cheap and everything. But we're almost paying probably $30 a month with the stuff we don't want to. And there's some shows that you personally like that might not be on there. That gets a little frustrating. I actually tried YouTube TV. I can give you a basic review of it. It's kind of neat. You can watch 40, I think it's like 40 or 50 channels. It's got all the local channels, which is cool, but it's $40 a month. And, I told my wife in hopes that she might, say, cool, let's give it a try. And she's like, you better cancel that darn thing before it charges you. So it's very much, and I can't see. I mean, I got all the respect in the world for the people who spend $100 a month on cable. I just don't know. I mean, I like watching sports and everything, but man, it's a hard thing.
Yeah, I mean, well, sports is why cable's still around. I think that's what people have said is the only reason why they bother these days is they want to have access to their sports programming. And obviously, I'm interested in YouTube TV for that very reason, is because of its sports offerings. But for now, I'm holding off since long. I'm living with a person package, so I will have access to the channels I watch and the sports programs. So I think definitely cable's on the downward trend for sure. It's a matter of when.
Well, you said that for ESPN. I mean, so much ESPN has been by far the biggest. Like you pay each cable provider pays a certain amount to each channel, and ESPN gets over half. And some of these smaller channels, they might get pennies a month compared to ESPN, and some of those other big places. So there's a lot of money, and it's exciting to see a lot of different cable channels. But it's kind of weird because in some ways you say, do we really need a baseball channel? And people who are baseball fans say yes, but is that a great number of our population? I mean, we've almost got so saturated, but there's like channels for everything. So it'll be kind of interesting just to see what happens. And let's check out Apple TV. I'd like to read more. I think it might be coming even later this week, and maybe we could talk about next week and see what happens there. Speaking of TV, and maybe TV that's getting a little bit old, but it's been around. Last week we talked about The Simpsons. It's been around forever. And then Saturday Night Live. It's been there. I think it started. I mean, I'm 44. It's about my age, and it's been around. And it's gotten a little bit more popular in recent years, especially with Alec Baldwin, portraying the president. It gets a lot of people fired up on each side about that. I don't know. Brandon, are you an SNL watcher? You try to catch it each week?
Not often. Not to say I don't mind the sketches when I'm, basically it's more of a mood factor for me. And, if I come across it on Twitter or clips, that's kind of like how I am right now. In the past, I used to kind of be more seek it at such clips or content out in the past, but it gets exhausting. Kind of when you make fun of the same subject matters. So it's I think sometimes I even take a step back or a break from such moves.
Well, and it's funny. And again, we're not getting into a humongous discussion about President Trump on this podcast, but it's funny because it used to be like you would watch a portrayal of like Bush or Obama or even Reagan or something. And although those guys definitely had things you could mock or make fun of, it seems like what's happening in Washington, even by design from the president, sometimes the surreal is celebrated. So, they were showing a comparison of last weekend. Alec Baldwin made fun of his speech where he talked about the emergency declaration. And it was funny until the very end. It was almost the exact same. And for as crazy as Baldwin's portrayal was, that was actually the speech, where usually in satire, you kind of, extend the reality into the craziness. But it's almost like the craziness is already there and the satire is not much further apart. So it's kind of interesting. And the funny thing about it is, Trump tweeted the Sunday afterwards about it. And, it fires up people who are fans of his, but to me, it also makes the show even more popular because you've got a guy with what's it, like 55 million Twitter followers. Anytime somebody mentions that, that's awesome for a show like that. So it's been interesting. And I think Saturday Night Live's still trying to get some moments. I shared with Brandon. We could share some of the notes for the podcast. Don Cheadle was the guest star, best known for his role in Rwanda. And he kind of threw some shade at Trump with wearing a Russian hockey jersey with Trump 45 on the back. Back when I was a kid, Sinead OConnor, a pop star, got some craziness over ripping up a photo of the Pope, and back then that was like crazy. Does messages like Don Cheadle now, or even Sinead back then, do you think that holds some interest of people where it's not just something that somebody could say, yay, I agree with their viewpoint, but could actually make some change? Like, do people care when people do stuff like that?
Not anymore, Chris. I mean, we're living in an era where our attention spans are very small, and I think that's why I think people do even more outrageous things today is to capture attention. So the subtle dig, I would say, is while it's lost appreciation, sadly. Just kind of with not even just kind of like something that's subtle that can catch eyes, and sure it'll catch eyes, but it'll it's not like you still remember Sinead O'Connor's controversial ripping the Pope page, but will anyone remember Don Cheadle wearing a anti-Trump jersey?
Yeah, and the interesting thing is, I mean, I guess I'm probably a tad more pro-Pope than anti-Pope, but it didn't make me really want to buy more or less of Sinead O'Connor's CDs. So yeah, I mean, partly people do that to try to get their name in the news to get more attention. But I wonder if there's a lot of people that they say, who cares? Like, I didn't want to go watch Hotel Rwanda, or I didn't rip up Hotel Rwanda once, Cheadle did that, So I guess, there's no news is bad news, or whatever the comment goes. But, people do that to get attention. But maybe to most rational people, maybe what they do doesn't mean as much as to maybe people are really fired up either way about the situation.
Yeah, that's a good point. I would agree with that.
Definitely. Now, not necessarily a political comment, and Brandon, I'm not sure if you're able to watch it, but 2 weeks ago, I think it was 2 weeks ago, the host and the musical guest was a pop star by the name of Halsey. Are I don't really know her. Have you heard of any of her music?
Oh yeah, I've listened to a lot of her songs. She's very, very good songs. Probably something you should not let your child hear, Chris. She uses some strong language. But yeah, Halsey's lately been getting some media attention of her own by often commenting on racial inequality here in America, for example. So, not surprised to see her on SNL.
Well, I gotta admit, I really don't know Halsey at all, and I couldn't tell you what her content was. And honestly, sometimes I'll turn the volume down. Generally, I might, maybe my daughter's in the room, and if there is foul language or whatever, I definitely don't want to listen to it. But what impressed me, and it really was a political comment. I'm not sure if it meant she was a better singer or not. But if you look at that video, and we'll share it on our show notes page, she was on the floor doing a canvas while she was singing. Did you get a chance to check that out?
Check it out, Chris. No.
Well, she actually painted a art while she was singing her song on SNL, and it ended up, and it turned out to be a half decent painting. And like I said, I don't know anything about her. I can't say she's my favorite musician. Maybe I wouldn't like her content or whatever else. But I mean, to do that's impressive. Have you ever heard of anything like that before?
No, I haven't. I mean, I'll confess, Chris. I mean, there were times when I would stay up till midnight to watch SNL live with my sister. And one thing we always noted was how terrible the musical act would sound on SNL, and it's just kind of a head scratcher because this is we've seen award shows don't seem to have this issue, but yeah, no, I think it's a smart move on Halsey to try to come up with something creative and try to provide a good visual, because I think that's where SNL thrives on is visuals and sound bites. So.
Well, I think it was about 15 years ago, there was a infamous thing where Ashley Simpson, Jessica Simpson's sister, got caught trying to lip sync, and she was embarrassed, and it affected her career. And I bet some people could think, well, she was lip syncing. Who knows? Maybe she was, or maybe she wasn't. I kind of looked at over the weekend there was the NBA All-Star Slam Dunk Contest, and they always talk about what will these stars do now? Will they do a two twists before they dunk? Will they jump over somebody or anything else like that? And I kind of looked at it as how impressive is it to go to the next level instead of just playing a guitar or the piano while you're singing, to actually do a painting. I mean, it's almost like the next level. So, I mean, what could someone do to top that? I mean, should you be driving a car around stage, or what's the next best thing? But props to Halsey, I guess. So good for her.
Yeah. Maybe someone sings while sitting in the audience.
Yeah, right. And you make a good argument. It's been around for 44 years, and I gotta say, and Halsey seems to be pretty well known, but there's been some weeks in Saturday Night Live where I'll see a guest, I'm like, who the heck is this? And probably 90% of America saying that too. So maybe and obviously not everybody. You're not going to get U2 or the best bands every week, but maybe that's the next step. Like you said, someone sings in the audience, or is suspended from the air, twirling around, or something like that. So at least Halsey took it to the next level. And like you said, maybe you should let your kid listen to it. But the painting blew me away. It had really nothing to do with what her song was. I couldn't even tell you what the song was, but the fact that painting at the same time just was exciting. One more thing about Saturday Night Live. Was there somebody over the years, and not necessarily even today, who did you like the best on Saturday Night Live? Was there somebody funny? And even if you didn't see them on Saturday Night Live, maybe somebody that came from Saturday Night Live. Who was your best all time on SNL?
Well, I would say that I liked it when Amy Poehler and what's her name? Oh, Tina Fey, when they came back and did weekend updates now and then. The weekend update segments were always funny. Seth Meyers did a very good job when he was there. just a lot of memorable moments from those segments. And I think the current crowd, Colin Joss and the other guy, I can't remember his name.
Michael Shea.
Yes. Why I can't believe I forgot Michael Shea's name. They're both of them are just they really do bring it on that segment. And so those are some of my favorites, I think. Yeah.
It's funny you raised an interesting point. You talked about Amy Poehler and Tina Fey. I'm guessing, was that the cast when you were in college?
Might have been the cast, maybe partly while I was in high school, though, because I think I remember them during the maybe either during the 2008 presidential election era. That was a really good year for SNL, I think, overall.
Well, Tina Fey doing her thing as Sarah Palin, and I gotta say the thing that just stuck out like crazy was the year that Palin actually came on the show and they did that rap, and I guess after Trump was on it, maybe it didn't seem that crazy, but when Palin came on and Amy Poehler did the rap with Palin,
that's a great scene.
Oh, my goodness! And back then it shocked me because I'm like, boy, how did they let her get away with it, and everything? And I'm sure, I love John McCain, but John McCain, obviously the guy that Palin was running with at the time, was probably holding his head in his hands, watching it wherever he was that night. But because it was probably not even the most complimentary thing to Palin, and that night just kind of blew me away. But it was interesting because I think for a lot of people out there, not just us, that was your high school, college days, and that was the cast that kind of stuck out for you when you're talking about Tina Fey and Amy Poehler. For me in high school, college, it was Adam Sandler, Chris Farley, stuff like that. And I've liked people since then, like I liked the Will Ferrell and the other people like that. But the one cast I loved was that, and that coincidentally was when I was in high school and college. So I think for everybody who liked the show, people can still watch it now, but probably the high school, college cast meant the most to everybody.
Yeah, sure. Maybe it's I think it's kind of like, that's when you kind of you're in high school and college, you're starting to learn more about rhetoric and jokes and how to be clever. And so yeah, maybe you start to notice that a little bit more in what's kind of like the joke. what you're starting to get the jokes, I think, is probably what I'm trying to say.
All right, enough SNL. Let's get into stuff that's in our wheelhouse. We like comments, and we're a new podcast, and we're glad seeing the numbers starting to go up a little bit each week, which is great. Had a comment on YouTube, which is exciting. Didn't recognize the name. It was a Melissa, I believe, and it was interesting. She commented. We were talking last week about Mary Poppins, and there was an article kind of speculating on, did they use blackface in the original Mary Poppins movie? Could it be racist? And she made the comment. It was interesting, and I gotta admit, on a podcast like this, we like to take different sides of the subject, and sometimes we just make arguments just to make arguments. It did seem a little bit silly to think that Mary Poppins was racist or she was using blackface. But the thing that struck me about the comment is she was talking about, oh man, I probably wouldn't subscribe, or I'll cancel my subscription to the New York Times because somebody said that. And I can understand you getting fired up about what people listen, or say, or maybe if you don't agree with anything. But Brandon, you and I are journalists, so let's talk some journalism tonight. It's funny, and I'm sure you would agree with this. I think today, especially, we're getting more into a society of people that if what we read we don't agree with, either politically or from a religious side, or it's not about something that supports our favorite sports team, we don't just not want to read it, but we get ticked off. Why do you think people are kind of getting more like that, especially today compared to maybe 20 years ago?
Oh, I think 20 years ago, I probably wasn't paying attention, Chris. I was probably like 6. But, I would take to hazard a guess. I would say that, I think everyone's more interested in their own bubble bubbles, and they all want a news source that reinforces their own views. I think, but then again, I have heard stories where people have subscribed to like the Times and the Wall Street Journal for print subscriptions, like actually having those both papers delivered to their doorstep. And yet, I think it's easier to get access to those stories just through your computer today. Heck, I follow the Wall Street Journal, and I see very conservative columns, and I find that interesting because I like to hear what the conservative opinion is on certain issues, and then I read Times on their Facebook feed, and glad to see what they have to say on the left side. You know, and then there's also some columnists that are, you know, conservative, New York Times, and there's some liberal columnists who write for the Wall Street Journal. I mean, I don't see why people have to, you know, why would you want to not know what has to say on certain issues?
Good point.
Stuff, if anything.
Yeah, I apologize. For some reason, a little sound issues tonight on Brandon's end, but you know, it happens on the internet sometimes. But you know, Brandon raises a good point by saying, you know, hey, you know, it's good to listen to other viewpoints. And Brandon, I agree with you. I mean, I think that, you know, what really captivates me, if it's a friend or if it's a politician or a faith guy or a sports guy, I like it when I hear somebody either read or kind of talk about an opinion that's not their own. That's why politically right now, I know he's passed on. I like guys like McCain, and I even like our former Governor Kasich, just because that even though they have a Republican on their chest or that's their party, you know, they can say, look, you know, hey, there's some ideas that, you know, we don't have to be Republican on because it's just good for the country. And I like people that are willing to kind of look at different sides of the angle. And I think it's really healthy to do. So, yeah, I definitely agree with you.
Yeah. I think it's, important to kind of just have diverse opinions. And The Guardian actually has a nice column called Burst Your Bubble, where this guy will post like 5 different articles from right-wing publications, and he'll say, this is what they're talking about, this is what this is kind of like the context you should kind of read it with, and it's just it's encouraging. I would love to see like some sort of an alternative for someone to do that for left-wing art, what they think are left-wing articles or columns, and how they view what the statements are being made. I think we should see more of that. And you know, let's have good discussion, good discourse.
What do you think about the devil's advocate argument, though? Because I mean, you know, and obviously, if it's what football team you like, you know, who cares? But if it was something serious, like if Christian was like reading about atheism or something else like that, you know, there is some arguments to say, you know, if it's a more serious political or religious issues, if you read too much of the other side, you might get captivated and want to agree or anything else like that. I mean, is there limits? I mean, you're right, it is healthy to read some others, but what's a limit that somebody can place? Because, you know, if you feel one way politically, you don't want to read too much that makes you feel the other way. So what limits do you place on yourself when you look at stuff like that?
I don't think, well, personally for me, I don't know if I necessarily agree that there's anything wrong with trying to read as much. I mean, it's kind of like, I guess the best analogy is you're saying, how far can you look over the edge of a cliff before falling into the abyss? But, you know, I would say that it's good to kind of have, like, at least, you know, look, I don't agree with you, but I understand you. But at the same time, you don't want to go and be super resistant at the same time. There's got to be a balance, because if you're super resistant to it, then you're really not demonstrating. You're not demonstrating faith. You're demonstrating that you're insecure, that you think that the other side might have something over you, and that's why it's important to engage with viewpoints that you don't agree with, and try to approach it from a very try to engage with it in a constructive way. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Well, and you can apply this everywhere. I mean, from sports, religion, politics, whatever else you want to read about, argue about. Is I think it's good to be educated, and it's good to be educated about viewpoints you may not like or believe in, and it's good to educate when you talk to other people, and I think that promotes more healthy discussion. So if you're talking about a religious issue or something else like that, if you understand what somebody that doesn't agree with you feel, it could kind of strengthen your argument. And here's my goal. If you want to argue in healthier ways. I mean, I think part of my issue I have with our country right now is we don't know how to discuss. We don't know how to disagree. It's funny. John's sick tonight, but we talked earlier this week, and John was, talking about sometimes a podcast can be even a dangerous spot to say, here's how I feel about this hot button issue, because, you don't want to scare people off. But it's interesting. I think as, maybe we started here and hopefully it goes around the world, but, it's good to always be able to express your differences of opinions in a good, healthy, constructive way. And I think in America we've lost that. It's sad.
Yeah, I think we'll see more of that with younger generations. I think I know from personal experience when I engage with discussions with certain people, I really am just trying to have try to always be constructive about it, and that sometimes gives me the weaker hand. And sadly, because people are more about just trying to make you feel stupid or trying to make you feel like they've won the debate, but you never changed my mind in the first place. Let's focus more on, what can we agree and disagree on, and it really does come back to the very issue that we no longer have a basis of facts to even debate on. And that's kind of like the situation we're in today.
And I think this is true in the church. I think this is true in other places too. Like I'll talk to some pastors in our church that I know, and they might say, "Hey, I got a critical email about something," and oftentimes it's something about what's said at church. And it's funny because I try to help them and say, "Look, when somebody is upset about whatever this is, a lot of times there's a deeper issue going on there." And, maybe it's not spiritual. Maybe it's an argument with their spouse or whatever else like that. But I think, too, even when we disagree on things, like I used to get in arguments with Browns fans about who's better, the Browns or Steelers. And I enjoy talking football, but it's pointless. But the whole thing about it is how do we get to know people behind it where, we can have fun sharing and joking and arguing about things. But, if we're really passionate about something, if it's something serious like religion or politics or something dumb like football, don't argue just to argue, but just relationship with people matter. Not winning an argument about Donald Trump or the Browns or whatever. It's people that matter the most. All right. Well, Brandon, before we close up tonight, it's funny. I'm not a huge soccer fan. I know John's not a big soccer fan. But, big stuff is happening. And next week, hopefully we'll have Brandon Dirksen on, and, we're going to have a lot of other discussions. But, Brandon, this is your time. We're going to spend a few minutes talking about the great world of soccer. And this is right in Brandon's wheelhouse. Brandon knows a lot about soccer. Brandon, you got to be excited. The MLS season is starting, a week and a half from now?
Yeah, the home opener match for my Columbus Crew is March 2nd.
Now, Ohio, and probably if we talked about this 30 years ago, Ohio wasn't a big bastion for soccer. But now Ohio has a lot of interesting stories. Briefly talking about the Crew. The Crew had plans. The previous owner wanted to move the team. And a big just, Columbus went crazy. And we saw, groups from Save the Crew to some other groups get together. And actually, the Browns owners, Jimmy and I can't think. What's his wife's?
Jimmy and Dee Haslam.
Yeah, Dee Haslam. Sorry about that. And one of the team doctors got together with some investors.
Dr. Dee Haslam.
Yeah, and they bought the team, and Brandon's excited. We've talked lots of times about that. And Brandon, have you bought more tickets? I saw on social media you're planning on going to home opener. How many games do you usually go to, and is it going to be more now that the teams are going to stay in Columbus?
Well, I became interested in the crew for when I went to an Irish bar over in Easton Town Center Mall, and for the MLS Cup final, which they were in. Columbus Crew obviously lost to Portland. I think the score was 2-1. Anyways, I started following them after that and started going to games. I think I maybe went to a couple games the 2016 season, maybe at least one game. I definitely went to like a couple more following year, and I even went to probably like 3 last season. So yeah, even got to during that time I got to meet one of the players and kind of follow the Save the Crew movement when the news about the possibly relocating had occurred. So it's been kind of fun to follow this just with the mindset of a journalist and seeing how the story's been covered and how the movements and the court process and the legislative process have been kind of getting involved in something that soccer fans aren't normally accustomed to.
You like soccer like I don't like hockey, and I remember I used to argue with friends about why everyone should like hockey, and I finally got to the point where, look, whatever, hockey will have a niche audience, and I'll be part of the niche audience. I don't want to argue with people anymore about if hockey is a good sport or not. MLS soccer is definitely getting more popular. The thing about the MLS is I read somewhere is it like the 5th best soccer league in the world? I think in terms of like if you're a good soccer player, what's the best league to play in? I mean, it's definitely one.
Yeah, I mean MLS is not. I don't know if it would even be 5 to be honest, but maybe it's getting better as a league. It is true that there are like better leagues in Europe, obviously English Premier League. Germany has a good soccer league, from what I've heard, and there's some probably other soccer leagues out there that are very highly respected. But yeah, MLS is it's still trying to find itself. It's figure out its identity. Recently, it's funny because it used to be kind of MLS wanted to, not necessarily be seen as a sellers league where they bring in talent and have it cultivate it here and then sell them to the English or European leagues. But now they're actually kind of embracing that. And that's actually probably healthy because a lot of what U.S. soccer revolves around is our men's national team.
Yeah, and do you see a big future there? Or it's funny, we live in Columbus. Columbus is an MLS city. We'll talk in a few minutes. Now Columbus is going to have another MLS city close by in Cincinnati. So I guess it's different because we live in the MLS city. John up in Youngstown, I'm sure there's not the interest there as it is down there. I mean, do you see a future for the MLS, not just in recruiting better players? Could it become a more popular sport? I mean, I don't see it overcoming the NFL, for example, but do you see upward level, or is it kind of a fun niche sport where, like me in hockey, where, hey, it's going to do well enough where it's not going to go away, but it won't be the NFL? I mean, what's a realistic future do you see for soccer in America?
It's hard to really say. I mean, the NFL is having a lot of issues right now with concussion problems, and even the president said he wouldn't let his kid play football. And I think that's going to be kind of an interesting dynamic to see if the pipeline of football talent will dry up or not. I'm not saying soccer is necessarily going to overcome football at American football by any shot here, but I do see soccer starting to become seen more as an equal rival and for the popular sports here in the States, such as NFL football and hockey. And Major League Baseball, of course. They're building stadiums. They wouldn't do it if it wasn't worthwhile.
Well, I guess the only thing I would challenge you on that is I think in Columbus, since Columbus doesn't really have an NFL team, and there's four teams probably within 2 hours away. I think it's more popular here. The thing about football that gets me is, even this AAF, this new football league,
Yeah, no.
it almost outdrew the NBA. The first Saturday night it came on, and the NBA is really popular too. So I agree with you to the point where I think as time goes on, maybe the next 10, 20 years, more and more kids probably aren't going to want to play football because of concussions, or may not be allowed to play football because of concussions. For some reason, football still it almost prints money. You look at college. The TV contracts are really crazy and outrageous. But it'll be interesting as time goes on. If there's more and more kids are playing soccer, how does that change? And maybe it could eventually become a rival, not just in MLS cities like Columbus, but in different cities saying, well, there's a lot of popularity in football, but if kids aren't playing it, does the talent go down or whatever? It's like baseball. In theory, baseball, it's been very popular for a long time, but you see a lot of the kids, especially in inner cities, stop playing baseball, and you see, there's a lot of more players from different countries and everything, and I think we live in an AAD society where we don't pay attention. That's why we may not like baseball as much. But, sports can start to fade. And it'd be interesting to see if football starts to fade because of worries of concussions. It may not be anytime soon, but, you're right. There could be a fall away to there in the future. But let's talk about the Crew. I mean, they've made the playoffs the past couple of years. What's realistic to expect from them this year? I mean, do they have a shot of winning it all?
Well, let's see. We lost our old coach back in December, who went on to actually coach the men's national team. And while that coach is doing very well, seems to find some more better reception than initially, because of he's won a couple games in the couple international friendlies, so that he's doing pretty well. Meanwhile, down in Columbus, we have actually the crew ownership has hired Caleb Porter to be our coach. Caleb Porter, of course, coached the Portland Timbers, who defeated the Columbus Crew on their own turf back in 2015. That first game I watched. So now, it's possibly that's exciting to have a good talented coach like that. They also hired Tiz Bezbachenko, who was a Westerville native who played soccer for DeSales High School back in the 90s, and now then he in his MLS career he helped Toronto recruit some of the best talent which helped them win the MLS Cup back in 2017. So yeah, we now got those two guys on our staff, and I think they are doing the best they can, having just got on board early January, because there was a transfer of ownership. So the Crew recently had a friendly down in Charleston in the Carolinas. They tied with the Chicago Fire. Unfortunately, their captain, Gahanna native midfielder Will Trapp, was sent off with a red card, but they still tied, so that's pretty impressive. We'll see how things play out this Wednesday when they continue their preseason.
You think realistic a playoff berth? I mean, is it disappointing if they don't make the playoffs this year?
Well, I think there's a good chance. Right now, I think the team is still the same team. It just doesn't have its old coach, and I think the new coach has been on record saying, I'm not going to come in and make all these changes or bring in new talent or whatever, or change the roster like drastically. I think we're going to start that question will be answered when we go into the summer, when we might add some players, because at that point the coach will have a better idea of how the team's performing, and what pieces need to be replaced, what holes need to be filled, and then we might see some. And with new ownership that seems committed to the city and to the club, we might see some really nice talent come to Columbus for once. Not to say there hasn't been any. We have some legends here, but Columbus has always been kind of the team that's been on a budget. So
Yeah, and speaking of ownership, it's funny. And for a long time, and I wrote some stories about the crew possibly moving, and I remember having a discussion with one of the Save the Crew guys. Where it was like, how are you guys going to pull this off? It's great that you're, and they helped pull it off. I mean, they were right, I was wrong. But speaking of ownership, I mean, obviously ownership in Columbus, whoever Saves the Crew, everyone loves, great thing. But the ownership's the Haslam family. Now, the Browns are kind of on the upside. Baker Mayfield, everybody else. So the Browns are getting a little better publicity, but over the past, ownership of the Haslams, lots of criticism of the Haslams, lots of crazy stuff going on with them. Do you think the Haslams overall are going to be good for the Crew once it gets past the excitement of like, hey, at least they saved the team?
Well, I think so far what we've seen from the Haslams is really D. D. Haslam has been the only one really being the face of the new Crew ownership, aside from Dr. Pete Edwards. So she was at the press conference when they announced the new ownership. She was also at the Columbus Sports Commission event not too long ago, talking about the Crew. So I think from how I'm reading it, it's really, I think, what the Haslam family was lacking in the NFL was someone like Dr. Pete Edwards, who's been the team's doctor since the beginning and has a good understanding of MLS. I'm sure he will be very key to pointing them in the right direction on how best to run the team. And he's been very good local face for the team and going around promoting the team on Twitter. It's fascinating to see what kind of tweets he puts out. But yeah, I think the Haslam people like to go after the Haslams over, but I think people are missing sight of like how Pete Edwards is will play a role in meeting their weaknesses, and they will come and help out with his.
Well, you kind of wondered too. I mean, with some of the issues that happened in the past about the Browns and the Flying J issues that the Haslams are going through, being able to save a team and exciting Central Ohio, it's got to be good publicity for them. And like you said, maybe Pete Edwards, right, the doctor, can kind of help fill in any missing gaps there and everything. So very cool. And we're talking soccer in Ohio, and interested to hear what Brandon thinks. Brand new MLS team, Cincinnati FC Cincinnati. Quite the story, and it's interesting talking to some Crew fans. There's already getting to be a rivalry, and speaking of someone who doesn't really understand soccer that much, what's the history been like before this year with FC Cincinnati and the Crew? I know FC Cincinnati won a tournament game in the past. What's happened in the past between the two teams?
That's basically, you summed it up. One tournament game in the U.S. Open Cup. We went down to Cincinnati. The Columbus Crew went down to Cincinnati to play the team, and we actually lost that game. And a lot of Crew fans that traveled down were not happy with the coach at the time. It was because an MLS team lost to Cincinnati, which at the time was a USL team, which is USL is for United Soccer League in the division, basically part of Division II. So essentially, a Division I soccer team loses to a Division II soccer team. That's just kind of embarrassing. And it did seem like, I think from what I remember, is Greg Berhalter, the coach at the time, had probably used his traditional starting roster, and that didn't pan out. So not sure. It's really hard. It's been an interesting debate to see some people say, well, is it really a rivalry yet? Or, what defines a rivalry? Is it geography? Is it, playing a couple games? Because Crew's rivals and traditionally have either been kind of considered to be DC United, Chicago, definitely, and to some degree Toronto. And that's just because they kind of decide when it's kind of evolved over time in games and seasons. So that'll be kind of interesting to see quickly how Cincinnati is characterized.
And it's already got a moniker. I did a lot of writing for the Cincinnati Enquirer, and down there they've already dubbed it the Hell's Real rivalry. If you take 71 between Columbus and Cincinnati, I believe there's a farmer that's trying to share the message of salvation, and one of the big signs says "Hell is real." And I don't know, has that been expressed in Columbus, or is that more of a Cincinnati thing? Because
it's a Columbus thing.
Okay, and maybe Cincinnati's picked up on it, but even that one game has picked it up. I don't think the team's playing until August, and I gotta say, as a casual soccer fan, it's probably the best thing for the future of the Crew and for FC Cincinnati, because not just huge soccer fans like Brandon showing us, it gets casual guys like me interested. It's like what makes the Browns Bengals interesting is they're both from Ohio, they're both battling each other and everything else. So it should make for some interesting soccer. I gotta say, FC Cincinnati, who knows how it's going to turn out. It's been a fascinating story. I mean, Brand's right, USL is a minor league. They were filling up Nippert Stadium where the University of Cincinnati Bearcats play a lot. And, they've drawn everything. And, I've had some friends there, season ticket holders, that are really excited about it. It's going to be interesting because in the USL, the tickets are a lot cheaper. And obviously, as FC Cincinnati goes to the MLS, you could get in the USL game for $10. And as Brandon knows, Crew tickets and MLS tickets are a little bit more. So it'll be interesting to see if the team keeps the same following when the tickets get a little bit higher. But it's going to be really interesting to see how they have advanced. I mean, that stuff doesn't usually happen in the NFL. There's not a semi-pro team that, packs up and joins the NFL. Has that happened that much in soccer where you see USL teams become MLS teams?
Well, I think you're the best. Well, I think if I might be wrong on this, Chris, so don't hold me on record on this, but I think Austin had a USL team, the Austin Aztecs, that I think actually was kind of a USL team that had a partnership with the Crew at one point. That team actually relocated to Florida and to Orlando, actually, and I think that's what became eventually the Orlando City SC. I could be wrong on that. That's the only example I remember of.
Well, it was funny seeing as they transition. I mean, I think there might be a couple players that play in the USL team for FC Cincinnati, but, it's not like the exact same team goes. I mean, a lot of times they say, hey, we may have to spend more money and I gift different players. But, I mean, either way, I think, and again, for Brandon, I mean, the Crew could be playing teams on the moon, and, Brandon doesn't care. He's a big soccer fan. But I think for casual fans like me, it's a great thing. More teams in Ohio, it's good. And I'll be interested to see how the MLS works. I mean, Columbus is getting a new stadium. Cincinnati is getting a new stadium. The price to play is getting a lot more. I know the Crew, their stadium was one of the original MLS stadiums. It was very historic. It was one of the first U.S. soccer-only stadiums. And now Columbus is getting a real nice stadium downtown. Cincinnati is building a new stadium. Aren't they both like 200 million plus stadiums, I think, Brandon?
What was the question again, Chris?
I think they're both 200 million plus stadiums in terms of cost.
Oh, yeah, cost. Okay, yeah, cost-wise, the Crew Stadium, the new Crew Stadium will probably be around $250 million in itself. So, but of course, that's getting tied into like bigger extension of their influence village. So obviously there's going to be some more costs with that associated, and local tax dollars are going to go towards infrastructure.
Yeah, which is, and that itself can be a controversial issue too, because a lot of people say, well, is it worth it, for a stadium or for a team? I know in Cincinnati, from covering that for the Enquirer, there was a lot of questions saying, hey, the city made a lot of promises when the Bengals and Reds were stadiums. And, some people get upset when the taxes go up and they don't see, either results on the field or if they say, why are my taxes going up for new stadiums? So it's going to be interesting to see, obviously, how happens on the field, how the crew do, how the new FC Cincinnati team does. And I'll be interested to see off the field too. I mean, Ohio's invested in MLS, and it'll be interesting to see, what ends up happening there. So, are you headed? Are you going to be? How many games did you say you were going to this year?
Actually, I got a season. I have made a pledge for 2 season tickets. So I'm taking Tori and myself for all matches if possible.
Nice. Well, maybe Brandon can record some video and we can incorporate that in your podcast. It'll be very interesting to see what happens. Well, Brandon, good conversations tonight. We are about at the hour-long mark. So, hey, thanks for hanging out with us tonight. Very interesting day. Some sickness, and that happens. But, Brandon, thanks for being on the show. I'm trying to think of some things that are coming up. Brandon Dirksen, he's opening a new ministry called Family Life, I think, or Dirksen Life, I believe it is. Apologize, Brandon, for getting that wrong. But we hope to talk to him next week. It's got an interesting ministry. He's trying to reach out to strippers, and he's trying to reach out to those in the sex trade industry. And I'll be interested to talk to him to see what his plan is and what he sees as part of that. Also, later this week, John Reed and I, hopefully John feels better. Brandon, we are getting back some of the members of our freshman dorm. I don't know if you heard the story. Have you heard it all, Brandon?
No, I haven't.
John and I went to a Christian school where it was very girls and boys didn't live in the same building, let alone the same hall. Well, our freshman year, they had the football team for the first year, so they had more freshman boys coming in. So they put us on the bottom wing of a freshman girls' dorm, which for a Christian college was like unheard of. It was weird. Well, we had a lot of football players in the hall. We had a lot of, different sorts of guys. It was a crazy year. People tried to sneak in beer. People tried to do crazy stuff. It ticked off a lot of the girls that lived on the floor above us. It was quite the year. So John and I we are talking to some of our friends, getting together some of those guys to share some stories and everything else. So, Brandon, I want you to listen to – I would have you on the podcast, but obviously since you were in the hall, you wouldn't really know much about it. But listen in. It should be interesting. A lot of crazy stories that we could tell from that time. Yeah, and that's some of the big stuff going on. So thank you for listening. Please share with your friends. We try to have some good conversation each week. We love the comments. Let us know what you think. Let us know if there's something that you want to talk about. Each week, kind of put together some basic pop culture stuff, but we're open to kind of respond to what you think. So let us know. Give us a comment on the blog. It's viewfromthepew.club, or message any of us on our social media channels, and we can get that too. Anything else, Brandon, you want to add before we take off for tonight?
No, I think I'm good, Chris.
Fantastic. Well, Brandon, thanks for your time. Thank you. Have a great night.
Have a great night.